On today's show, the Capitals just proved that no lead is safe. Not at home, not against a rival, and not when it matters most.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan HOLMI. I've covered the Capitals for the past 4 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minute Cast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day and for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the best version of the Capitals still isn't enough. Not good enough to pull out a win. A bit later, we'll talk about this team needs help, not hope, and is there help coming? But just to get it going here, we're going to talk about the game and how this loss changes the trust level on this team, because when you watch this game at home, or say you saw it at Cap One, there was a real feeling throughout, good chunks of this game that the Capitals are going to win this game, right? That they're back on track. And what better way to go into the break here, heading up to Christmas and all of that, than to have a nice victory against the Rangers. As it turns out, it was not to be, because the Capitals folded. And to avoid, cliches and those kind of things, you got to play a full 60-minute game. Guess what? The Capitals did not do that. A former player came back to haunt them in Taylor Raddysh. A guy who was kind of nondescript, didn't really pop off the page with the Capitals, has been a healthy scratch at points for the Rangers. But what he did, what the Rangers did well tonight, and it's something the Capitals preach that they need to do: crash the net, hang out in front of the net, and good things will happen. Taylor Raddysh exemplifies that, hanging out in the paint there, right up in Logan Thompson's grill, right in there, ready to make a change. And that was definitely one of the biggest parts of the Rangers' success tonight, was doing the thing that brought Connor McMichael so much luck last season. Just getting in the net, getting in the netminder's grill, looking for those tips, those deflections, whatever you got to do. Because, Logan Thompson, the best netminder in the NHL, the numbers back that up, that when there's a really good deflection or a bounce, it can be too much. And it was the case as well for New York as well, with Shesterkin in net there as well, that, there were a couple of those bounces, or the one where he had to kind of reach back and you're like, wow, he stopped it, but his hand was past the goal line there, that ultimately, is one of those things where, the goalies came into focus in this game. But at the end of the day, I'm going to go ahead and say it, that the Rangers wanted it more than the Capitals did. And that's what it's all about. Because you take a look at the game, Taylor Raddysh, like I said, former Capital, 2 goals, 1 assist, 3 points, 3 shots on goal. And I know that these players really like it to stick it to their former teams, and that was the case. But so let's get into it here. The takeaway: the loss changes the trust level. So that's the big take here. You can't trust the Capitals with a lead right now. Full stop. That's where we're at. And it's proof, what we saw in the game tonight, that you thought they were going to win this. Everyone was high-fiving each other at Cap One, and the vibes were immaculate surrounding this team heading into the Christmas break here, but they couldn't sustain. And I know the record said 16-0-0 when leading after 2 periods coming into Tuesday night. But records lie sometimes, right? Hockey tells the truth. And what we saw against the Rangers, that was the truth screaming at you. What happened in yesterday's show is I spoke glowingly about the Capitals and how they have so much success scoring 5-on-5. Only the great Colorado Avalanche do it better than the Capitals. Well, what do all of those advanced metrics mean? They mean nothing when you can't close out games, when you can't win games. And the look on Spencer Carbery's face says it all. He is frustrated. He has the know-how to fix all of this. He just does not have the tools out ready for him to use, because the Capitals, hey, we had Leno back. Ryan Leonard was back. The players of impact that were out is Pierre-Luc Dubois, right? He's out, going to be out for a bit here. And Rasmus Sandin, who's dealing with an upper body injury. But this is your team, ostensibly, to take it over the top, because the Capitals lead in this game after 40 minutes. They allow, count them, 5 goals in the third period. And the one thing I'll say about Logan Thompson, and not to put it squarely on him, is that when the wheel wobbles with him, it falls off. When you pull that thread, that whole sweater falls apart. And that's the case with the Capitals. They lose 7-3 at home at Cap One before the holiday break. Now, you know, if Spencer Carbery wasn't the coach that he is, I would say that he is on the hot seat. This is a different situation. I have no problem with Spencer Carbery. I don't. I legitimately believe he's the right coach for this team. He just does not have the tools out there. We've screamed it. I've talked about it on the show many times ad nauseum. They swung and missed on Ehlers. They swung and missed on Quinn Hughes. Deneau, they've swung and missed on a lot of different players. And at some point, the onus of this has to go on Chris Patrick, at least in part. And I've heard quite a few saying, well, maybe his purse strings are tied. Really? They weren't for Brian McClellan. He came out swinging. And look at what kind of jump that gave the Capitals last year. What we see out on the ice right now is not enough. Has it been good in glimpses here or there? Yes, but what we saw tonight exemplifies exactly what I'm talking about. Not good enough. Like I say, losing 7-3 at Cap One before the holiday break, that's not a bad bounce game. That's not a puck luck. That is a total collapse. And we've seen it before with this team that, you know, it's easy to get drawn into these games like, you know, what the Sharks game, these kind of games, the game against the Maple Leafs, that you're drinking, you know, the red Kool-Aid, but it's not the truth. It's fool's gold. This was supposed to be the get right moment. Instead, it's now 3 straight losses and 6 losses in 7 games, 1-4-2. That's trend territory. That if you were hoping that things were going to get easier after the Red Wings weekend, you know, last checked in first place, that we're going to play against the Rangers that are kind of on the outside looking in. Well, guess who took it to the Capitals? The Rangers, yet again, a team that has been a thorn in the side of the Capitals going back many, many years, as was evident tonight. And let's be real here for a second. If you're a Capitals fan watching that third period, you felt it coming. Once Taylor Raddysh tied it at 3, you could feel the air leave the building. And who was nothing but a grin from ear to ear? Well, that was none other than Taylor Raddysh. Again, you know, you hear about it all the time that these players really relish sticking it to their former teams. That was the case in this game as well. And ultimately, like I say, just the onslaught in this game of goals is just unacceptable. The way that this game fell apart the way that it did. But 2 goals in barely over a minute. Alex Lafreniere tips one past Logan Thompson. Vincent Trocheck bangs home a rebound, and Artemi Panarin finishes it off with an empty netter. You know, there's a lot of salt in the wounds, and one of the things that Spencer Carbery said today is he goes, I just want to win a game. I want to win the game today so I can go into Christmas break here feeling good. Because I think he's feeling kind of down. I know that he cares a lot. And that's one of the things that I love about Spencer Carbery is he doesn't mail it in. It's not just a paycheck for him. He wants to win hockey games because he loves hockey. He loves the Capitals. So it's kind of more heartbreaking for him, I guess, than anyone else that he's got the know-how. It's like, hiring a contractor to build your deck and you have, just really poor tools. He's looking at him like, I could build you the best deck out there if I had these tools. He just doesn't have them. And that's the thing. That's one mistake. That structure being breaking down, talking about the Lafreniere tip-in, the Trocheck, the Panarin. That's a big mistake, an absolutely catastrophic Christmas time collapse is what we saw out there. And honestly, that headline might be underselling it, because here's the scary part. The Capitals actually played a good hockey game for long stretches, which brings us to the hard part, right? That the Capitals, what we have seen from them is encouraging, but they cannot find a way to close out these games. All right, so coming up here after the break, the best version of the Capitals still is not enough. Straight ahead. NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to tilt, a receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Player props update as guys heats up. So do what I do on any given Sunday, Monday, or Thursday. Open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit of money down on these games, whether it's the Commanders, Ravens, or whatever team in the league. It makes those games so much more exciting. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Thank you for making Locked On Capitals your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you haven't already done so, go check out our new Everydayer Club. Access to ad-free audio feed from Locked On Capitals, compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcast app. An invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of this show. So if you want to come talk Capitals hockey with me on Discord, I would love to talk with you. All you got to do is go to lockedoncapitals.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in the second segment of today's show, we're talking about 40 minutes fake. That what we saw on this team was not truly who they are. That this team can play good in stretches and they can totally collapse and fall completely on their face. That is what we saw in the game tonight. So let's dive into it here. In the second segment here, the best version of the Caps still isn't enough, because when you can't close out a complete game, then there's a problem, because that's what it's all about at the end of the day, right? We can talk about individual player stats. We can talk about, goals, 5-on-5, all those kind of things. But what it comes down to at the end of the day is W or L, and who has the most. And I guess in that mix, who has the most points. Because even when the Capitals play well, they're razor thin and that margin disappears fast. The Caps were excellent in the second period, genuinely good. John Carlson gets it going, scores 23 seconds into the period. Dylan Strome finally gets on the board, his second goal in 21 games. That was the goal I was talking about. And if you're listening on the audio side, I'm going to try to paint the picture as best I can. Is the goal, the puck is shot, and what happens is that Shesterkin reaches back and he grabs it with his glove. And you think to yourself, wow, that was a great stop there. But then when you see the video review, right, that all of a sudden you realize that his glove was behind. the goal line there, and ultimately counted for a goal for Dylan Strome. His second goal in 21 games, and Alexei Protas continues his quiet heater, I guess is what I'm going to say. 3 goals in 4 games, 6 in December. And, the triumphant return of Ryan Leonard in the scary moment in the game where he gets kind of tripped there, kind of tomahawks him there a little bit, and he crashes into the boards. And you could tell that Leno was feeling pain. And I'm thinking to myself, this is not optimal. It was tough. Back after missing 7 games, and he immediately injects life into the lineup. 2 assists, drew penalties, created offense off the rush, absolutely embarrassed Matthew Robertson with that deke. You know the one. If you know, you know when you watch the game. And what was apparent is Leonard's return to the lineup really sparked the team's missing offense. Night and day difference is what we saw. But the thing of it is, and I've talked about it before, is that Logan Thompson can't save the Capitals. Ryan Leonard can't save the Capitals. We need more. And ultimately, this is what Spencer Carbery was when he was talking about we don't have a finisher. It is by committee. And that's fine if that committee is up for the task at hand. But it's, we got the goals in this game. We should have won this game. It's when it falls apart. But like I say, Leno being back, that's huge. That's great, truly. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The Caps played one of their better 40-minute games of the season and were only up by 1 goal. And that's the problem. They don't have separation scoring. They don't have margin. They don't have a gear when things tilt. It still triggers into that fight or flight. And everything that we had learned falls to the wayside. If I'm going to give them a bit of advice, you got to clear the front of the net. The secret sauce for the Rangers in the game tonight was setting up shop in front of the net, either in the paint or in the slot area in front of the net. That is where the Rangers feasted tonight. And, something that the Capitals know, that they need someone to try to bolster that, for this team to get them really going. And that's the thing. And when the game turns chaotic, the Rangers leaned into it. The Capitals unraveled. The better teams out there, they answer the bell. When things aren't going well, the Capitals collapsed. And you're starting to see those weaknesses really drawn into focus. And, talking about Logan Thompson, and, at the end of the day, normally a love fest when we're talking about LT. But let's talk about Thompson because, 14 saves, 6 goals against, not counting the empty net. Rangers had 10 shots through 2 periods, and that math simply does not work. And it's one of the things, about Logan Thompson, a lot like a lot of other netminders, is that when they get rattled, you see this in baseball, when a pitcher gets rattled, sometimes you're like, look out, it's over, get that bullpen going. That was the case for LT as well. And again, to be full, assessing the situation the best that I possibly can, it was not, solely on him. The team folded in front of him, but not to absolve him here either. I'm handing him his flowers. I'm handing him a little bit of tough love here as well. 14 saves, 6 goals against, not counting the empty net, when the Rangers had 10 shots through 2 periods. And that math, it really doesn't work. And I'm not saying he's the reason they lost, but he didn't save them either. And that's what's drawn into focus, that how many nights does Logan Thompson save the Capitals? And when he's less than stellar, you see what this team is made of. And elite teams get saved sometimes. And that's what I'm talking about. The Capitals have got to dig deep. They've got to find a way to finish these games out, because now it's really kind of spiraling out of control here. You had the high water mark, or not the high water mark, but the last real, victory was against the Maple Leafs. And then you've seen this team struggle kind of ever since. And, not a total failure. Like I said, there was chunks of this game where it felt really good. But when you talk about just the games here as of late, the 5-2 loss to the Red Wings on Saturday, the 3-2 loss on Sunday, and now the 7-3 loss to the Rangers. It's tough because they got the Devils, the Panthers, the Rangers again. It is not going to get any easier for our favorite team. So, like I say, the Capitals are going to have to dig deep. They're going to have to put their work boots on and ultimately do the things they need to do to get them back into victory lane. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about this team needs help, not hope. The thing of it is there help on the way? I'll discuss straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube, like the videos, and comment anything down below. All right, in the final segment of today's show, help is coming, maybe? I don't know what to believe anymore. I think that ultimately, as of right now, as I record this, Christmas Eve tomorrow, today, depending on when you're listening to this, and well, happy early Christmas, everyone. Happy Christmas Eve. I really wish I could have come to you guys with some good news like, yeah, that was a nice win over the Rangers, right? High five, everyone out there. Not the case. And in a lot of ways, questions, maybe more questions than before, that the help, that we saw Miroshnichenko up here. And at some point, I think that we need to do the thing where we see Ilya Protas on this team. It's at least worth a look, right? Because if they're not going to, in fact, go out and pick up a player that's going to help them, then maybe they need to seek internal options. Is that going to help? I don't know. But at this point, it's a worthwhile thing because let's be honest. Did we think that Ethan Frank was going to be the little spark plug that he is? So let's talk about what's next for this team. And the team does need help, not hope, because this roster, as constructed, is not stable enough to survive the schedule ahead. That when we take a look at the standings, they could fall in a hurry, and it could be it. It could be over, or on the outside looking in sooner than later. Because you see the Rangers picking up. They got 2 more points on this game here. And, teams that are underneath of them could get hot. The third period wasn't unlucky. It was exposed. What was exposed? Poor rebound control, missed coverage, lost battles in front, panic hockey once they fell behind. And again, not to be missed in all of this, I didn't mention earlier, without Tom Wilson in the lineup. Leonard kind of was that guy, the Tom Wilson figure. Do I think the Capitals would have won the game with Tom Wilson in there? Nah. I think that's the easy out, right? That when people go, if we had Wilson in there, we would have won that. Nah, probably not. He could have scored a goal for sure, maybe been a bit of a difference maker, but it was a collapse in this game. The edge was gone. Of course, Matt Rempe tried to stir things up. Of course, the Rangers sensed weakness, and not really a guy out on the ice tonight that I think should try to match up with Matt Rempe. We didn't have McElrath in there. We didn't have Wilson in there. Leonard coming back from injury. I don't think that would have been ill-advised. I think that Duhaime would have been down for it, even though I don't think that would have gone so well for him. I think that the Rangers didn't need to be desperate, right? I don't think they needed Rempe to be Rempe, who he is, a guy that's got messed up fingers from getting in a fight earlier. So, with Reeves, that they didn't need to resort to those. They just went about and played a great hockey game, and took advantage of a weak Capitals team. I'm going to be honest with you here. And here's the stat that sums it all up. Taylor Raddysh scored 2 goals in this game, like I said. That was the hard part. Taylor Raddysh, this is a guy who scored 1 goal in 38 games for the Caps last season from December to March. If that guy is torching you in a third period collapse, then you better look for the fire exit or a life preserver, as it is getting bad in a hurry. Smoke is filling the room and the water's getting deeper. And again, is there help coming? That's the question. Not bad luck. And that's ultimately a warning sign. Because the schedule after the break is brutal. It's jam-packed, no breathing room until the Olympics. I think that in a lot of ways, the Capitals are probably like, thank God the Olympic break is coming here at some point just to kind of reset. And I don't know if that's how they're thinking, but it just seems like they're just head games, that song Head Games. I think they're really caught up in their head right now. and they're having a hard time breaking loose. And Spencer Carbery wants structure, but structure only works when it holds under pressure. And where is last year's Capitals team, right? They figured it out last year. I mean, the big subtractions were Mangiapane and Taylor Raddysh, kind of two players that were like, meh, I mean, I guess they were there. They were part of the success, but the nucleus of this team is still here. How did they lose their way? And right now, this team, it doesn't hold under pressure. It just does not. The Capitals need to get their game together, and they may need to get someone from elsewhere to help them do so. Again, I'm still waiting, Chris Patrick. Hello, I'm still waiting. You've swung and missed on all the players so far. I mean, who is the big fish that you brought down? Justin Sorda, who, not to say anything disparaging, but, kind of not, I don't think what any of us had in mind for. You're like, yes, everything's fixed now. That I'm still waiting for that. They swung on Ehlers and Quinn Hughes and, Danault, right? And at the end of the day, Danault wouldn't have been the good fix for this team. But in any event, that's the problem. And, the translation here is this might not be a fixable thing internally, right? That, you can mix and you can match and you can, and I know that Spencer Carbery's like, Chris Patrick, I'm doing what I can do. Have you not watched the games? I'm taking those forward line combos and putting them in a blender each and every game. It's not working, right? That we need help from outside, and it needs to be an upgrade. Not a Martin Erat or a Michael Latta, for a Philip Forsberg. We don't need to go down that road, but we need a reasonable upgrade that's going to bolster this team. Is it going to cause some pain for the Capitals? Absolutely. Because all the talk of, we can trade out Hendrik Slop here and Sonny Milano and pull down. It's not the way it's going to work. It's going to be a draft pick. It's going to be a prospect. It's going to be a roster player or maybe all of the above to pull down that. And that's going to be hard. But, what do you care more about? The player, depending on who it is. Again, Hudson, Leonard, these guys are untouchable as far as I'm concerned. But there's going to be some pain there to make this team better. And it's holding on and bracing for that inevitable pain that's going to have to happen in order for this team to get better, because it's not working. And unless, Capitals fans out there, you are okay, with just kind of letting this season go and like, it'll be better next year. Okay, based on what? It's going to be very difficult. So the Caps are off until the 27th, then it's New Jersey. We'll see if the break helps, but after Tuesday night, this team does not get the benefit of the doubt anymore. Not after the third period, not after that collapse. Unacceptable hockey. Capitals fans, you should feel it. It's funny. I'll talk about this and people are like, you can't be so hard on this team. Are we watching the same game? Are you vested in this team winning, or are you just totally sold on that this team is going to be better a year or two now, based on what I'm not entirely sure that, I guess Hudson could be here, and I guess that Crystal could be here, and, Lyndon Lakovich could be here, and maybe. But that's really being overly unrealistically optimistic. That I don't want to be in a position where I'm putting my hopes in the Capitals being good 3-4 years from now. If I want to think that way, I already have the Nationals, right? Because that's where they're at. But as far as the Capitals are concerned, it's not cutting it. And these collapses, Detroit loss, Rangers loss. Where's the lifeline to help pull this team up? Chris Patrick has got to do something, or the Capitals will continue to flounder. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. If you need a last-minute holiday gift, or someone keeps asking you what you want, make it easy. Ask for the Everydayer Club, an ad-free episode of this show, exclusive Discord server access, and more. Subscriptions, you can find them at lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. For those of you on the video side, we send you to the first ever 24/7 national Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel on audio. Make sure your second listen is NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan HOLMI, and I'll talk to you again next time.